As my husband, Marcellus, was making our dinner, a message from his coworker suddenly appeared. "Boss, I miss you." After a split second of deliberation, I responded on his behalf. "Come over. My wife isn't home." Shortly after, our doorbell rang. The color completely vanished from my husband's face, leaving it ghostly pale, inside the spacious kitchen of our upscale condo in Buckhead, where the rich, savory smell of slow-cooked oxtails filled the air. It was the very fragrance of domestic comfort, the idyllic family life everyone imagines. Or so I had staunchly believed, right up until that precise, shattering moment. Marcellus stood before the stove, gently stirring a pot that simmered on a low flame. He had on the navy blue apron I had given him for our anniversary, humming a vintage R&B love song. From my vantage point, Marcellus was the perfect portrait of a successful black man, a polished professional who also understood how to care for his family. He often said providing for the family was a man's duty, but cooking a meal at home for his wife was a true privilege. I sat at our kitchen island, idly turning pages of an architectural magazine, though my thoughts were miles away. Warm, golden light shone upon the marble counter, where Marcellus's new iPhone rested ominously in silence. Its dark screen was a bottomless void, concealing secrets that even I, his wife and closest confidant, had never once suspected. Marcellus turned to me, a brilliant smile spreading across his handsome features. The faint lines forming around his eyes only enhanced his appeal. He requested I taste the simmering gravy to check if it was seasoned correctly, before he returned his focus to his intricate mixture of seasonings. That was the precise instant. The phone screen on the counter suddenly illuminated, silent, but for a cold blue flash announcing a WhatsApp message. My gaze snapped toward it. The short phrase displayed on the lock screen was brief, yet it was all that was needed to shatter the serene existence I had fought so hard to create. Sender, Connie, intern. The message itself read simply, "Boss, I miss you." Merely 4 words, "I miss you." My heart was numb to pain. That feeling had vanished a week ago when I first held the revealing bank statement. All that remained inside me was profound disdain and a carefully constructed, methodical plan. I recognized the name immediately. She was the new intern in Marcellus's department from several months prior. I recalled Marcellus mentioning her once, complimenting her on being sharp, courteous, and very keen to learn. I never could have fathomed that her desire to learn also included pursuing her own boss's husband. I drew in a deep breath, fighting to calm my pounding heart. The ingrained logic of a 30-something black woman who'd fought past endless obstacles to reach her station in life prevented me from screaming or destroying our things. Creating a scene would only allow Marcellus to invent some flimsy excuse about a joke from an immature girl. I needed something much more concrete. I needed hard evidence they would be unable to dispute. Marcellus continued dicing vegetables, the steady rhythm of his knife on the board masking the frantic pounding inside my chest. With quiet purpose, I picked up his phone. The passcode was our anniversary. How profoundly ironic. He used the most sacred day of our marriage to guard his sordid secrets. I keyed in the 6 familiar numbers, and the screen unlocked, revealing the WhatsApp conversation with the new message right on top. Not needing to read it, I swiftly typed a response. My cold, precise fingers moved across the screen. "Come over. My wife is not here today." I tapped send. I saw the twin blue checks confirm delivery, and a faint smile touched my lips. I then took a snapshot of our short exchange, forwarded it to my phone, and erased every trace from Marcellus's device. I needed him to remain entirely unaware when my performance began. I put the smartphone back precisely where I found it, at the very same angle. A slight tremor ran through my hands, not from fear, but from the suppressed fury simmering deep inside my soul. I gazed at Marcellus's back. He looked like the same devoted man, but now, to me, his entire facade was utterly revolting. He was performing the part of a perfect husband, while his thoughts were undoubtedly drifting to his youthful, attractive mistress. If he insisted on acting in this charade, I would personally direct the final, tragic scene. I smoothed my hair, settled my features, and attempted to regain my normal sense of composure. The tempest within me stayed concealed behind a calm expression, waiting for its moment to destroy everything. This was destined to be an exceptionally long night. Marcellus presented the steaming oxtails on a large platter, setting it in the middle of the table. The rich scent of allspice, thyme, and beef filled the dining room. He took a cloth and carefully wiped away the tiniest splatter from the platter's edge. A day ago, that simple gesture would have filled me with affection. Now, however, gazing at the stew felt like staring at a sweet, sugary poison. He dished out a generous portion of white rice for me, and after selecting the choicest piece of meat, he set it on top. In a warm, low voice, he murmured, "You should eat while it's hot, my love. I made sure the meat is tender." He even boasted about visiting 3 separate markets to get the finest cuts, all to pamper me as I supposedly deserved. I took the plate my husband offered, exerting every ounce of my will to keep my hands from trembling. I raised a morsel of meat to my lips and chewed deliberately. The texture was perfect, and the sauce had the exact spice level I enjoyed. Yet as I swallowed, a nauseating bitterness filled my mouth, like I was consuming dust. I had to take a long drink of water to stop myself from retching. My gaze fell on the man opposite me. Marcellus was eating with gusto, occasionally offering me side dishes and recounting amusing anecdotes from his job. He spoke of a new project, how the chief executive officer had praised him and his ambitions for a promotion, yet he never once uttered Kailani's name. Or the young intern. I marveled at how someone could manage a secret life with such exquisite skill, capable of reading an "I miss you" from his lover, and then instantly resuming the part of a model husband who cherished his spouse. Perhaps over our 6 years of marriage, he had rehearsed this act so very often that even I could no longer tell the difference between truth and deception. My mind drifted back to our humble start after we first married. We began with almost nothing in a tiny studio on the city's edge. I recalled Marcellus taking my hand and vowing to work relentlessly so I would want for nothing, promising a proper home. And he did, in fact, keep his word. This opulent condo and all its comforts stood as a testament to our shared struggle. But it now appears that with material wealth, as prosperity grew, so did the corruption of hearts. Contentment soured into base appetites, and the loyal wife who once shared a humble sandwich with him now seemed bland next to the new flavors outside. Feigning a full stomach, I set down my fork and knife. I explained I was feeling a bit tired and had lost my appetite. Marcellus immediately donned a mask of concern. He rose, came to my side, and placed his hand on my forehead, feigning a check for a fever. His hand felt warm, yet the moment it touched my skin, a deep chill seeped into my very bones. I shifted my head just enough to evade his deceitful touch, murmuring an excuse about needing some water. My eyes darted sideways to the clock on the wall. The small hand neared 7, while the large one approached 12. Time crawled by with a taunting slowness. From her office, or even her student flat, her journey would take between 30 and 45 minutes. There was no way I would let this perfect chance escape me. My wife is out tonight. That simple lie was more potent than any formal invitation. Upon returning to the dining table, Marcellus was already clearing the table. He urged me to go rest in the living room, insisting he would manage the cleanup. The sight of my husband rolling up his sleeves to do the dishes, a scene I once boasted of to friends, now felt like merely another act in his repulsive performance. I sat on the couch, picking up the remote, but I didn't press the power button. My gaze remained fixed upon the front door, while my ears strained to catch any sound from the hall. A savage war raged inside my head. A piece of me prayed she wouldn't show, that this was all some cruel joke, letting my delusion continue. But the other part, the colder, crueler part of me, craved for the doorbell to chime at any moment. I needed this agony exposed in all its brutal reality, for a festering wound only heals once it's lanced, despite the permanent scar it leaves. Each minute dragged on with an impossible weight. The sound of running water from the kitchen stopped. Marcellus emerged, drying his hands on a kitchen towel, and offered me some fruit for dessert. I simply shook my head, managing a weak smile. It must have been a twisted, unnatural smile, but Marcellus was oblivious. He was far too certain of his own flawlessness. Or perhaps he never cared enough about my state of mind to see the storm brewing in my eyes. The clock chimed precisely 8 in the evening. The apartment was so quiet one could hear the second hands crawl. Marcellus settled on the sofa across from me, scrolling through news on his phone with an air of absolute calm. He likely assumed it was just another quiet evening with his wife, or maybe he was already composing the next message for his lover to send once I fell asleep. He had absolutely no idea that the real storm was just about to erupt on his very own doorstep. Ding-dong. The doorbell's chime shattered the stillness. It wasn't a jarring sound, but in that tense silence, it echoed like the starting pistol for a war. Marcellus snapped his head up, startled. His eyes held a flicker of surprise, blended with a hint of confusion. He glanced at the clock, then toward the door, muttering, "Who could possibly be here at this time?" He then turned his gaze on me, as if I held the answer. I stayed perfectly still on the couch, my composure chillingly calm. "Stay put," I told him. "I'll get the door." My tone was quiet yet resolute, giving him no space for argument. I rose and moved deliberately towards the door. Each footstep on the hardwood resounded, heavy like the hammer striking the final nails into a coffin. My heart was thudding hard, not from fear, but with the peculiar thrill of a predator about to ensnare its prey. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and placed my hand on the knob. I turned the lock and swung open the heavy door. In front of me was a young, petite black woman, flawlessly made up, yet with a face that still held a trace of its girlhood. She wore a form-fitting dress, accentuating her youthful frame, and in her hands she clutched a small box with a meticulously wrapped single cupcake. The very moment she saw me, the flirtatious smile forming on her lips evaporated, replaced by a look of unadulterated panic. Her eyes widened into saucers, her pupils constricting in terror, and her complexion, once flushed with warmth, turned a stark, papery white. She froze as her trembling hands nearly lost their grip. She had clearly expected Marcellus to open the door. She'd surely rehearsed the scene, leaping into his embrace, telling him in a sugared voice how much she missed him, but the harsh reality that confronted her was the sight of me, the lady of this house, his legal wife, obstructing the entryway with a gaze as sharp as a blade. I said nothing at first. I just watched her panicked expression in stillness. My quiet only made the atmosphere more suffocatingly dense. Kaani retreated half a step, her lips parting as if to speak, but her throat seemed constricted, as though someone were choking her. She glanced past me into the condo, then her eyes darted back to mine with the look of a common thief discovered in the act. I heard Marcellus's footsteps approach from behind. "Who is it, babe? What's the holdup?" he asked. His voice threw Kaani into a deeper state of turmoil. She glanced around, as if searching for an escape route, but I wasn't about to let my little prey escape so easily. I smiled. It was a smile more frightening than any sob could be, and then I spoke. My voice was crisp and clear, audible to the one inside and the one out, and it was heavily laced with icy authority. "Hello, Connie. Did you come here to visit my husband? My question was a splash of ice water for Connie, and, at the same time, a jolt for Marcellus as he drew near. I watched Connie flinch. She understood she'd walked into a trap. But there was no way out now. The door stood open. The performance had officially commenced. Connie shrank like a tiny bird that had mistakenly stumbled into an eagle's eyrie. She gripped the cake box so tightly her knuckles went white, stammering. She could hardly form the words to explain her unannounced visit at this particular hour. She claimed she heard Marcellus was unwell, and since she happened to be in the area, she chose to deliver him a little cupcake, hoping for his swift recovery so he could resume mentoring her, the intern. A lie so clumsy, it was pitiful. I knew full well that Marcellus wasn't ill, and that this exclusive community was so secluded it was impossible to be just passing by unless one came intentionally. But I let her lie hang in the air. The thrill of a cat-and-mouse game is not in killing the mouse right away, but in toying with it until it collapses from sheer terror. Keeping a faint smile on my face, I locked my eyes on her face, which was shifting hues with every passing second. Seeing Connie attempt to turn around to escape, I spoke in a voice as cold as ice. If you take just one step back into this hall, by tomorrow the whole company and the images and messages of you two will reach your parents back home. Now, come inside. We'll discuss this calmly, and I might let you retain some dignity. Connie was frozen in place, shaking, before she trailed after me. Hesitantly into the house, I mentioned that while she was here, she might as well see the place, that the atmosphere was quite cozy. I stressed my desire to formally introduce her to my husband. I drew out the word husband intentionally, as if branding the man paralyzed behind me with my claim. Marcellus was already in the living room. When he saw me enter with Connie, his composure shattered more than hers. His eyes bulged, his mouth agape, but he was utterly speechless. The phone he was holding slipped from his grasp and landed on the sofa. He gazed back and forth between Connie and me, wildly swinging between terror and bewilderment. He couldn't grasp why Connie was present, or why I was greeting her so calmly. I guided Connie to the middle of the room and placed her in the armchair opposite the sofa where Marcellus typically sat. Connie perched on the edge, her spine rigid and her knees pressed tight, afraid to even raise her eyes. I faced Marcellus, motioning for him to join me. He moved like a hollow automaton. Marcellus stumbled towards the sofa. Despite the AC being set at 75 degrees, sweat formed on his brow. He sat down, at the furthest possible distance, treating me like an explosive device about to detonate. I began the introductions. Indicating Connie, I reminded Marcellus she was that wonderful intern he praised so often who'd come to visit him. Late at night with a cake, no less, after learning her boss was ill. Next, I proceeded to introduce Marcellus to Connie, describing him as the world's most model husband, a man who had never once let me down. Every single one of my compliments felt like a sharp needle piercing Marcellus's skin. I watched him physically recoil. I saw Connie cast a desperate look at Marcellus. She was waiting for a word, an excuse, any sign of support to rescue her, but the sole thing she got was his spineless avoidance. Marcellus stared at the floor, nervously picking at his shirt's hem, too afraid to speak a single word. His cowardice only fueled my disdain, and I suspect even Connie began to feel a sting of disappointment. The man so impressive and commanding at work had suddenly transformed, once his affair was exposed, into a pitiful little man more afraid of his wife than any predator. I rose, announcing I would be getting our guest a beverage. I inquired what Connie would prefer: orange juice, perhaps some water, or a cup of hot tea? In a voice that was almost a whisper, she said water was fine. I offered a smile and went to the kitchen. The living room fell into a deathly silence. I was certain the moment I left, the two of them would start to exchange frantic glances, but wouldn't risk speaking, afraid I could overhear. And that was precisely my goal, to allow the put-in-front-a-dated dread to slowly consume their thoughts. In the kitchen, I was deliberately noisy, clattering glasses and plates around, to ensure they knew I was nearby, hearing every sound. I opened up the cabinet, my eyes scanning past the fine Waterford crystal reserved for our special guests. My hand settled on a sleeve of flimsy, disposable plastic cups, the type meant for a backyard barbecue or an office water cooler. I selected one cup and filled it with water from the tap. The choice was entirely deliberate. I meant to diminish Kaani with every minor detail, ensuring she understood her exact place in our home and in our life was as flimsy and disposable as that cup, an object to be used and then discarded, not worth a second thought. I returned to the living room holding a tray and set the plastic cup of water right in front of Kaani. For Marcellus and me, by contrast, I served tea in delicate fine china cups edged with gold. The jarring distinction between the two sets of cups was unmistakable on the glass table. Kaani stared at the plastic cup, clashing horribly with the luxurious table, and a deep blush of humiliation crept across her face. The message had been received. It was an unspoken affront, but more profound and piercing than any insult. I sat beside Marcellus, this time pointedly pressing myself against him. I took his arm and rested my head upon his shoulder with a tender gesture. Marcellus became as rigid as a wooden doll, his muscles drawn tight with tension. Through his thin shirt, I could perceive the frantic pounding of his heart. Cold sweat was trickling down his temples. I started the conversation with some deceptively polite social questions. I asked Kaani how the internship was progressing, if Marcellus was especially demanding of her, or if he ever bothered the interns. While I was talking, I stroked Marcellus's arm and gave him loving glances from time to time. Kaani responded in monosyllables, not daring to look up at the intimate scene unfolding just before her eyes. In her gaze, I saw a mix of envy, bitterness, and fear. She was observing how the man she desired belonged, legally and in every way, to another woman. The sweet promises Marcellus must have murmured to her in private became utterly insignificant before this devastating reality. The very air in the room was so heavy it felt difficult to breathe. Not even the low hum of the central air could clear the suffocating atmosphere. I felt as if I were watching a tragic, silent play where each actor was struggling to perform their part, except that I alone held the script and already knew the ending. Without warning, I changed the topic and spoke to Marcellus in an animated voice. I mentioned our vacation plans for Street Lucia next month. I described a perfect future with passion, the azure sea, the white sand, and the romantic dinners by candlelight. I then added that we were viewing a lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where we could spend weekends tending our garden and fishing, and that we were already figuring out how to look after our parents in their later years. Every word I spoke was a dagger, plunging directly into Kaani's heart. She would see that she was totally excluded from Marcellus's life, his future plans, his assets, and his long-term goals. All of that was ours as a married couple. In that life, there was no space for her. She was just a passing fancy, a momentary pleasure for Marcellus. Marcellus sat there in a deathly silence, neither confirming nor denying a single thing. He appeared to be on pins and needles, wishing this mental anguish would finally come to an end, but I wasn't about to release him so easily. I wanted to sear this horrible night into both of their minds, so they would feel a chill every single time they recalled it. I turned to Kaani and with a smile tossed out a seemingly harmless question, but one that was heavily loaded with intent. Kaani, as youthful and beautiful as you are, I am certain you have numerous men pursuing you. As for me, I'm getting a little older. I need to hold on to this one so that he doesn't get away. I'm terrified someone might snatch him up if I'm not watching. They say these predatory women are everywhere nowadays, right? Kaani flinched and quickly looked down at the floor. She immediately clenched her fist so tightly her knuckles went pale. She knew precisely who I was alluding to. The term predatory women, although uttered softly, was as sharp as a blade, cutting away the last of her dignity. My words hung in the atmosphere, making the situation feel even more suffocating. Kaani couldn't bring herself to answer. She mumbled something incoherent and dodged my piercing stare. I could see her delicate shoulders trembling violently as she tried to compose herself. The bold and flirtatious air she had when she first arrived had vanished entirely, leaving only the faint image of a guilty woman awaiting her sentence. But I wouldn't allow them to escape so easily. I turned toward Marcellus and tightened my grip on his arm, my nails digging into his skin through his shirt, asserting my powerful presence. I looked at my husband, shifting my voice to a sweet tone, while my gaze stayed as sharp as a dagger when I asked about the Blue Ridge Lake house we had viewed last week. I spoke loudly and with clarity, guaranteeing Kaani would hear every detail. I reminded him our parents adored the land, that it had great energy, and being near the river, it was quite refreshing. I stressed how my parents had pledged to contribute $15,000 for the renovation as a present for their future grandchildren. At the topic of kids, I could feel Marcellus's whole body stiffen up. This was his greatest weakness. We had been married for 6 years, but we delayed having children until we finally reached financial security. And now, with everything in place, I uncover this affair. Yet I raised the subject of children deliberately. I knew it was the ultimate anchor, the family and social validation that a fleeting affair like Kaani could never provide him. I described with great zeal a happy home filled with the sound of laughter. I said, next year would be perfect to start trying. At our age, it is the ideal time, and I am hoping for a boy. Then I pivoted to Kaani and asked if she agreed it was a wonderful plan. The direct question made Kaani jump, and the teaspoon she was holding fell from her fingers. The sound of metal hitting the porcelain dish echoed sharply in the dish. Stillness. She scrambled to pick it up, and with a crimson face, she stammered, It is a great plan. I'm certain you will be very happy." How hollow that forced approval sounded coming from my rival's lips. I knew she was screaming on the inside, completely devoured by jealousy. She arrived here thinking she could carve out a spot for herself in our world, but all she had received was a bold declaration of a future where she simply did not fit. Our substantial assets, strong family connections, and future goals, all of it created an impenetrable fortress around our marriage, a fortress that someone like her, with nothing to contribute, could never dream of breaching. I pushed my psychological assault to the financial front. I told Marcellus, I'm wiring the down payment for the house tomorrow, so you need to sign the documents for the title transfer quickly. I intentionally stressed that the property would be in both our names. It was a clear statement of my authority over our finances, a warning that what Marcellus had was tied to me, and if he left, he'd have nothing. Everything. Marcellus, drenched in sweat, just nodded. I knew he was praying I would stop, cease this torment cloaked in sweet words about our future that were more terrifying than a blade to his throat. He understood the unspoken warning perfectly, concealed within each of my words. Don't be a fool and throw away everything you have for a fleeting moment of pleasure. All this talk of our home and children seemed to drain the last ounce of life right out of Keelani. She seemed to diminish in the armchair, clutching the water glass with both hands, as though searching for a warmth long gone. In a go, my eyes drifted from the flimsy plastic cup she held to the gold-rimmed one in my own hands, and I felt a vicious pleasure. I raised my cup, taking a slow sip, relishing the delicate scent of the premium green tea. I remarked on how exquisite the tea was, with its clean, smooth flavor. I offered Kaani some as well, but my eyes lingered on her cheap plastic cup with feigned pity. "Connie, are you sure you're all right with just water? Would you like me to get you some orange juice? Water is so bland, wouldn't you say?" My tone was gentle, like a wealthy benefactor speaking to a pauper, yet laced with an undercurrent of contempt. Kaani waved her hands dismissively. No, I'm perfectly fine. I was just thirsty. Water is more than enough. I wouldn't want to be a bother." The word bother felt utterly absurd coming from her. Her very presence in my home at this hour was the ultimate imposition. I placed my cup on the table. The sharp, solid clink of porcelain on glass echoed through the tense room. My gaze shifted to Marcellus. He remained seated like a statue, his eyes fixated on the toes of his shoes. I decided it was time to involve him more in this little game. I instructed him to slice some apples for our guest. "A man of the house must be a gentleman, darling. How could you let a guest sit there unattended?" Marcellus, as though jolted by an electric current, shot up from his seat, retreated to the kitchen for the apples and a knife. He fumbled with the fruit, his hands trembling, peeling it clumsily and leaving the skin in jagged, uneven chunks. The very man who once carved carrot flowers for me now couldn't peel a simple apple. In front of his lover, it was clear his mind was malfunctioning. Fear had completely numbed his senses and skills. When he finally placed the W-dub plate of apples on the table, I pierced the most perfect slice with a fork and brought it right to Marcellus's mouth. "Open wide, my love. Let me feed you. Don't use your hands, they're filthy." Marcellus paused for only an instant before finally accepting the apple slice from me. The image of a loving couple feeding each other in front of a third person was both perfectly normal and utterly inflammatory. I then nudged the plate of apples in the direction of Connie. "Have some, Connie. They're honey crisp, so they are incredibly crunchy and sweet." Connie's eyes fell on the very piece of apple Marcellus had just consumed. Then her gaze shifted to the plate before her, as if a large lump had formed in her throat. How could she possibly swallow a single bite after witnessing that performance of affection? The preferential treatment didn't just stop with the cups. It extended to all the attention and care. I was his wife. I had every right to dote on my husband in public and receive his care. In return, she, however, no matter how much Marcellus desired her outside, was nothing but an intruder here, a captive audience to the spectacle of our happy marriage. I watched as Connie's eyes began to redden. She was likely crying internally, or perhaps regretting the foolish decision to come here and be degraded like this. Yet I felt not a single ounce of pity. My compassion was gone. The moment I spotted the words, "I miss you," on his phone, I knew. Mercy is a luxury I never afford to those who dare to threaten the happiness of another's family. Silence descended upon the living room again, but this time the air was much more charged with hostility. Connie, perhaps to diffuse the tension or salvage her image as a caring person in front of Marcellus, cleared her throat and timidly inquired about his health. "Boss, how is your stomach feeling? Is the pain any better?" Her voice was low, laced with seemingly genuine concern. She even offered to have her mother send up a jar of honey with black garlic from her southern hometown, which she insisted was incredibly effective for his condition. Hearing this, the color drained from Marcellus's face. He waved his hands dismissively, insisting he was fine and that it was unnecessary. He shot a terrified glance my way, knowing his foolish little mistress had just made a critical error. She was revealing an intimacy with her boss's private affairs that went well beyond the bounds of a normal professional relationship. I let out a sharp, cold laugh, a sound that made both of them flinch. I fixed my gaze on Connie with a piercing stare, as if I were peering into her very soul. "Wow, Connie, you're quite concerned for your boss. Imagine that. The wife who shares his life and his bed with him hasn't even made him that special honey. But you, a mere intern who has only been here a couple of months, how could you possibly know about his health issues? I intentionally drew out the words shares his life and his bed to put Kaani firmly in her place. I gave no quarter and continued my attack. Does Marcellus complain about his ailments in the office for everyone to hear, or do you two meet privately so often that you're aware of his dietary secrets? Kaani was utterly speechless, her face turned from flushed to ashen. She stammered that she had simply noticed him at the office, clutching his stomach with a pained expression, and had asked out of pure assumption. A pathetic excuse. I knew Marcellus's stomach condition was chronic. To protect his image as a strong leader, he almost never showed any weakness in public. He only let his guard down when he was alone with someone he genuinely trusted. I turned and gave Marcellus a scathing glare. And you? Why are you burdening your employees with your problems? Next time you feel unwell, you tell me. Your wife. Don't make other people worry and bring you remedies. They'll start to think your wife doesn't properly care for you. The other day, you said you were running late from a client dinner and that your stomach was bothering you. I'm now realizing what kind of client dinner that was. At my insinuation, Marcellus lowered his head in silence. He knew exactly what I was referring to. The night he used the work dinner excuse, he had really been dining with Kaani, and likely to gain her sympathy, had complained about his condition to her. I had unmasked the hypocrisy of a subordinate's concern and exposed the raw truth of their shady relationship. Her excessive interest was clear proof she had crossed a line, and I, as his wife, had every single right to challenge and expose that hypocrisy here in my house. The wall clock struck 9 in the evening. This little game of cat and mouse was reaching its climax. I felt it was the perfect moment to deliver the finishing blow, one that would completely shatter the intruder's spirits and serve as a final warning for my disloyal husband. I pulled my phone from my pocket and placed it on the table. I casually swiped my finger across the screen, feigning a quick message check, and let out a deliberate sigh. Things are just so complicated now, aren't they? The news is filled with nothing but sordid affairs and scandals. My friends were just telling me how forward young women are nowadays. They'll message another woman's husband as if he were their own boyfriend, with absolutely no sense of shame. I paused for a moment, watching their reactions. Kaani sat perfectly still, but her breathing grew quicker. Marcellus was discreetly dabbing the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. The tension in the air was like a taut wire, ready to break. I sharpened my tone and continued. I also often go through Marcellus's phone to assist with his work, and recently I've noticed many messages arriving from unfamiliar numbers. Seems to be a young woman, from what I can tell. Her name sounds so pure. Probably an intern. She sends such affectionate messages to Marcellus. I shot a sideways glance at Kaani. Every bit of color had drained from her face. Her lips, which were painted a bold red, were now pale and quivering. With a smirk, I delivered the final blow. You know, Kaani? Just the other night, I was at home while my husband was cooking, and a girl sent a message right to his phone, saying, I miss you. The audacity, wouldn't you agree? With his wife right there, to send a message like that. Was she trying to challenge me? My words struck Kaani like a bolt of lightning. She stared at me, her eyes as wide as saucers. Pure terror etched into her pupils. She understood it all. The I miss you message from just a short while ago. The reply, come on over, my wife isn't home today. It was all a setup, a flawless trap I'd laid myself, and she, like a foolish moth, had flown straight into the flame. Kaani's hands and feet started trembling uncontrollably. She looked at me, as though she was looking at a monster. She realized the woman before her was no meek and simple housewife, but a master of psychological games. I had known everything all along, yet I acted with complete normalcy, inviting her inside, serving her water, offering her a pastry, and then I slowly peeled back her mask, layer by layer, until she was left utterly exposed in her own humiliation. Marcellus, beside me, was just as stunned. He turned to me with an expression of absolute horror. He never could have imagined I'd seen that message, or that I was devious enough to draw Kaani here and shame her like this. My cleverness and my cruelty sent a shiver down his spine. He now knew he had greatly underestimated his own wife. I stared directly into Kaani's eyes. My look was icy and disdainful. I didn't need to utter another word. My silence was the harshest sentence of all. I had exposed everything, but I had yet to speak her name directly. I wanted to see if she possessed a shred of dignity to leave on her own. It would be the final act of mercy I'd offer her before she departed this house. Kaani could not bear it any longer. The unseen pressure coming from me, Marcellus's cowardice, and the brutal truth that was just laid bare had finally shattered her will. Every second must have felt like agony for her, as if she were waiting in an executioner's chair. She hastily snatched the handbag she had placed next to her. In her rush, the bag struck the chair with a soft thud. She sprang to her feet, but her legs were unsteady, and she nearly fell. Without daring to meet my gaze, with her head lowered, she muttered that she needed to leave. She stammered out an excuse that she mumbled an urgent matter had arisen at home, her mother demanding her immediate return, and she was so sorry she couldn't stay any longer. Her voice was fractured, verging on tears. Before we could reply, she bolted toward the exit, fleeing like a cornered thief. The cake box sat abandoned on the table, a testament to the utter failure of her little visit. Marcellus began to rise, likely to escort her out or apologize, but I was quicker. I placed my hand on his thigh and squeezed firmly, a clear signal to stay seated. My glare intensified, warning him not to attempt anything foolish at this moment. Marcellus received my message and remained frozen, his eyes tracking Kaani's back with his gaze until she vanished past the door. I then rose and followed her slowly to the doorway. I moved with calm and self-assurance, a stark contrast to her anxiety. Kaani was fumbling with her shoes, but her hands were trembling so intensely she couldn't succeed. I leaned on the doorframe, arms folded, observing her with a feeling of both pity and disdain. Once she finally got her shoes on and was about to open the door to leave the apartment, into the corridor, I spoke her name, Kaani. She froze instantly, startled, and turned around with a frightened, begging expression. She likely feared I would create a scene in the hall, hurl insults, or maybe grab her by the hair, but I wouldn't. My dignity would never allow me to act so crudely. I closed the distance to her and whispered into her ear, so quietly that only we two could hear. My voice was as soft as a whisper, yet as cold as glacial ice. The next time you visit my husband, I suggest you call first. If you're seen lingering here this late, the neighbors may get the wrong idea and assume something untoward is happening in this respectable home. And remember this, Marcellus's wife is not always away from home. At my words, every trace of color drained from Kaani's face. She just nodded. Repeatedly, just like a pecking hen, she stammered a yes and then ran to the elevator, pressing the button. Frantically, desperate to escape from that place as quickly as possible, her small, solitary, and pathetic form was outlined by the hallway's bright light. I watched until the elevator doors slid shut, completely consuming her. A slight smile played on my lips. One down, the little prey had received her warning. Now, not even for money would she dare get near my husband. But the war wasn't finished. The main adversary, the one who had caused to me this deepest wound, was still sitting right in our living room. I turned around and slammed the door. The sharp sound of the lock echoed through the apartment. It signaled the start of the judgment for the treacherous husband. I took a very deep breath, composed my frigid expression, and walked inside. The wooden door shut, sealing off this entire apartment. Filled with a lethal tension from the world outside, the triumphant smile that had graced my lips vanished just like a flame in the wind. I did not return directly to the living room. I paused for a few moments, my hand clutching the cold doorknob. Waves of sickness rose from my stomach, almost unbearable. I had just delivered a brilliant performance, but the cost was a deep, bleeding wound inside my heart. I turned and moved slowly toward the living room. Marcellus remained in the same position, perfectly still on the cream leather sofa. His head was bowed, his hands clasped tightly across his knees. His state was pathetic, a complete departure from the sophisticated, confident husband he once was. Yet his wretchedness stirred no pity in me. In fact, it only served to deepen my brown scorn. I approached him, took his neglected smartphone from the table, and glanced from his face to the device. Then abruptly, with a swift motion, I slammed it forcefully onto the glass table. Crack! The loud, brutal sound shattered the oppressive silence. The screen splintered into 1,000 pieces, its cracks forming a spider web. A perfect metaphor for our marriage. At that instant, Marcellus flinched, staring at me with a face drained of color. I folded my arms and glared down at him, my voice cutting and steady, utterly empty of emotion. I declared, "Explain." The message reading, "Come over, my wife is not home today. I was the one who sent it. Did you think I was some fool?" Who was completely oblivious. And with that, Marcellus stared, his jaw agape, his expression one of utter disbelief. He never expected me to reveal my hand so quickly and powerfully. He must have assumed I had only faint suspicions, never imagining I orchestrated everything from the very start. His lips quivered as he tried to form a weak excuse. "Honey, it is a misunderstanding. She and I are simply colleagues. Her visit today was a complete shock to me. I swear to you that I had no idea." He was attempting to play the victim, his eyes avoiding mine. A bitter laugh escaped me. "Colleagues? A colleague messages you at 8 in the evening to say she misses you? A colleague who knows your personal habits and ailments better than your wife? A colleague who dares to visit your home assuming your wife is out?" I stepped closer, staring directly into his face, and enunciated each syllable. "Do not mistake me for a fool. We have lived together for 6 years. I know you far better than you know your own self. That secretive glance, that jump when the doorbell rang, that spineless behavior before your mistress, it all betrayed you completely." Marcellus hung his head, not venturing a response. He knew that against such undeniable proof, any falsehood was futile. His silence served as the most definitive confession. A wave of profound disappointment washed over me. The man I had adored and trusted was nothing but a deceitful coward, incapable of facing the consequences of his own choices. Marcellus's silence only fueled the flames of my rage. I had no need for his hollow apologies. I wanted him to confront the stark reality he had desperately tried to conceal. I went to my handbag, which sat on a cabinet, and retrieved a bundle of documents I'd organized just that afternoon. This was the tangible evidence I had been secretly collecting for the past week, ever since my suspicions first arose. I flung the papers right at his face. The white pages scattered and landed in a disarrayed heap upon the shattered phone. Marcellus reached for a page, his hands trembling violently. It was a bank statement detailing the last 3 months of transactions. I had circled the wire transfers made to Kaani Jenkins, with vague descriptions like gift or lunch. The sums were not enormous, just a few hundred at a time, but the rate was alarmingly high. A single payment was particularly glaring, $1,500 from last week, labeled "Happy Birthday." I pointed at the page, and my voice rose. "So how will you explain this? $1,500 for an intern's birthday gift. For my birthday, a floral bouquet, and a simple dinner satisfied you. Your generosity is genuinely quite admirable." Marcellus was stunned into silence, sweating heavily. He never expected me to know his finances so intimately, but I wasn't finished. I then pulled out the screenshots of his WhatsApp messages, taken from his iPad where he had neglected to log out. Flirtatious texts, arrangements for lunch and movies, and even sickeningly sweet expressions of longing, I tossed down. Another picture. It was a movie ticket from 2 weeks ago for an 11 p.m. show. That day, he claimed he was late because of a client dinner, but he was actually seeing a movie with his lover. And finally, I produced the photo of a single, long, dyed brown hair found in his car's passenger seat. My own hair is black and short. That hair was without any doubt Connie's. Facing such undeniable proof, Marcellus completely broke down. There was absolutely no way to deny it or offer excuses any longer. His mask of hypocritical virtue had been torn away, exposing his true, treacherous nature. He let his arms fall, sinking into the sofa with a look of pure despair, and then he began to cry, with the tears of a grown man, a sight I had rarely seen. "I'm so sorry, I went mad for a moment. She bewitched me. Please just forgive me this one time." A tardy apology and a weak excuse, shifting all the blame to another person. Cheating men always use the same script. I fell into temptation. I couldn't resist. Seeing him weep froze my heart solid. I walked to the kitchen. I took the pot with the oxtail stew he'd so carefully prepared all afternoon. While Marcellus watched in utter shock, I emptied the entire contents of the pot into the trash can in the corner. The stew's delicious scent mixed with the sour smell of garbage, creating a sickening stench. I turned to Marcellus and hurled my final words at him. "My love for you is exactly like this stew. Before, it was delicious and precious, but once contaminated, it becomes nothing but trash, and I do not eat trash." My act of throwing out the food was like a douse of cold water for Marcellus, who seemed to snap out of his delusion. He realized I was completely serious. The resolve in my eyes and actions declared an irreversible break. Marcellus rushed toward me, fell to his knees, and clutched my legs. He cried uncontrollably, begging me not to abandon him, not to divorce him. He swore he would end everything with Kaani, and that he would even quit his job if it was needed, that he would do anything to fix his error. He pleaded, mentioning our parents and our 6 years of marriage, trying to hold me back. I remained as rigid as a statue, letting him sob, hugging my legs. My heart was already gone. His vows now only produced more disgust inside me. If he had actually valued our 6 years of love, he wouldn't have been with another woman. If he had genuinely thought of our parents, he would not have let matters get to this point. Coldly, I shoved his hands away and stepped back. I looked at him with pity, saying, "Keep what little dignity you have left. Don't be pathetic. My decision is final." I turned away and walked straight toward the bedroom. Inside the closet was the large suitcase I'd already packed that afternoon. I pulled it out and added some more clothes and my most essential personal items. I took very little, only what was truly mine. This house, this furniture, shards, now felt permanently stained by his betrayal. I walked into the living room with my suitcase. Marcellus was still on the floor, weeping with his head buried in his hands. His cries echoed in the quiet room. I placed a document I had printed earlier upon the table. It was the promissory note for the $40,000 my parents had loaned us early in our marriage, when we lacked funds for the condo remodel, with receipts in my father's name. That $40,000 is a binding debt. Don't even consider not repaying it. When you sell this house, your first priority will be to settle this debt, and only then will we divide the remainder. I informed Marcellus coldly. Prepare to pay back every single cent. The house is in both of our names, but I have no intention of fighting for it. I'm leaving it for you and your lover to inhabit, but my parents' money must be returned to me." Marcellus glanced at the papers, then at my face. His expression was pure desperation. He knew that sum of money was impossible to find overnight, but I felt no sympathy. It was the price he owed for his deceit. I needed him to feel this loss deep in his bones, both emotionally and financially. I then pulled my suitcase towards the front door. Before I left, I gave the house one final look. What was once our shared home had become the tomb of our love. I opened the door and stepped into the cool hallway. The click of the door shutting behind me resonated loudly. One last time, ending 6 years of my life with that despicable man. Never looking back, I began to walk with a firm and steady pace to the elevator. A different life was waiting. It would be difficult, but it would be honest and tranquil. The rideshare vehicle drove through the city's empty night streets. Sitting in the back, I watched the streetlights pass by in a blur. My mind felt empty, yet oddly unburdened. I shed no tears. It was as if they had all dried up within me, hardening into a sharp resolve. I was making my way over to Lysandra's apartment. Lysandra, my closest friend from college, was a highly respected city lawyer who specialized in divorce and asset litigation. She was powerful, resolute, and incredibly sharp. I'd given her a heads up, so she was already there, expecting me in the lobby upon my arrival. When she saw me exit the car, my face drawn, pulling the heavy suitcase, Lysandra said nothing. She walked over in silence and wrapped me in a firm hug. In that warm embrace of friendship, I nearly began to weep, but I contained myself. This was not the moment for any weakness. Lysandra led me up to her apartment. It was a compact but comfortable space, filled with the soothing aroma of lemongrass, essential oil. She poured me a cup of hot tea, urged me to sit, and asked me to tell her the whole story. So I did. I told her everything, from that damning message to the performance I orchestrated to lure Kaani over, and the clash with Marcellus, and my choice to leave. I spoke with a surprising calmness, like I was telling another person's story. When I finished, Lysandra brought her fist down on the table with a solid thud. She swore and told me I'd done exactly right, that a disloyal man deserves no forgiveness, and my method for dealing with his mistress was brilliant, poised, yet simultaneously exceptionally cruel. Lysandra then started to break down the situation from a legal standpoint. She examined all the evidence had collected, the financial records, the text messages, the pictures. She nodded, confirming that with this, she had more than strong enough for a courtroom victory. She agreed to represent me if Marcellus refused a mutual divorce. However, Lysandra informed me that before heading to court, we needed to teach that perfect pair a lesson they would never forget for the rest of their days. Divorce meant my freedom, but real justice was punishing the betrayer. She suggested a more clever plan for revenge. Rather than causing a scene or a social media expose to become town gossip, we would strike at what Marcellus valued most, his career and his good name. Lysandra directed me to compile all the evidence into one single file. She offered to assist me in composing a whistleblower email for the management of Marcellus's firm, a devastating blow to his finances and credibility. It would be 1,000 times more agonizing than a few slaps to the face. I nodded in agreement, our gazes locked, filled with sheer determination. That night was when we would orchestrate the final assault. The 2 weekend days went by in an eerie silence. Marcellus was calling relentlessly and texting me messages, but I refused to respond. I powered down my phone, dedicating my time at Lysandra's home to prepare that special present for my husband and his lover. Lysandra assisted me with the email's draft. Instead of any insults or slander, we used professional, objective, and precise language as if it were an indictment. The email's subject line was concise, yet powerful. Report on internal code of conduct, violation and inappropriate. Relationship between team lead and intern. I scanned all the evidence, the WhatsApp screenshots of their suggestive chats, the bank records showing he used his salary for her gifts, and the misuse of company resources, the picture of movie tickets from work hours as proof of his professional negligence, Lysandra compiled. Everything into a single PDF file over 10 megabytes, clearly noting all the dates, times, and locations. Monday morning, the sky was a grim gray, as if forecasting a storm. At 9 a.m., exactly, when office workers were at their desks. To start checking emails, I powered on the computer. Lysandra, seated beside me, placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder as a sign of support. I drew a deep breath and reviewed the draft one final time. The recipient list included the CEO, the HR director, and the heads of every involved department. I avoided sending it to the entire company. I did not wish to be the source of cheap gossip. I only sent it to those individuals with the authority to decide Marcellus's and Kayani's fate. The mouse cursor hovered above the send button. My heart was pounding, not out of fear, but from the raw tension of this crucial moment. One single click would forever alter the lives of 3 people. Marcellus would lose the career he had painstakingly built for 10 years. Kayani would lose the promising future that was just beginning to blossom, and I would finally close a painful chapter to start a new page. I recalled Kayani's shameless expression when she arrived at my home. I remembered Marcellus's cowardice as he knelt, begging for my forgiveness. I recalled the oxtails discarded in the trash. The final ounce of compassion remaining in my heart disappeared. "Farewell, ex-husband," I whispered to myself, pressing down firmly on the left mouse button. Sent. A brief, cold notification flashed on the computer screen. The email, which was loaded with the death warrant for Marcellus's and Kayani's careers, was gone. I leaned back in my chair and released a long, deep sigh. A sigh of relief. It was done. The arrow had been shot, and its path was now irreversible. I just had to wait for the inevitable storm to crash down on the traitors' heads. That Monday, the office air at Marcellus's company must have been as thick as the night Kayani appeared at our home. According to a contact who worked in his department, my email had a massive impact, spreading like a contagion in mere minutes. Marcellus tried to project an air of normalcy upon arrival, but inside he was surely consumed by panic. At 10 in the morning, the HR director summoned him to a conference room. There, they presented the proof that he used the company card for personal spending with Kayani and had fabricated receipts for business meetings. It was a textbook case of embezzlement, and he was suspended without pay pending a complete financial audit. Marcellus stood, his face a ghostly pale. He opened his mouth to try and make excuses, to claim it was a misunderstanding or slander, but the HR director raised a hand firmly, silencing him. On the table, he placed a thick folder containing the printout of the very PDF file I had sent. Faced with such undeniable proof, Marcellus was rendered completely mute. 2 security guards approached and instructed him to collect his personal items and to vacate the office without delay. Everyone was aghast, seeing the man who had been a respected team lead escorted from the building like a common thief. Marcellus walked in total silence, head bowed, through a sea of whispers from the people watching him. That public shaming would forever tarnish his career. I, over at Lysandra's house, took the call without a flicker of emotion. I did not smirk with satisfaction, nor did I feel one shred of pity. It was the price of his betrayal. When he destroyed our marriage to chase his fleeting desires, he personally signed his career's death sentence. 3 days on, his termination was made official. The reason cited in an internal notice was a grave violation of professional ethics and damaging the company's image and trust. Marcellus didn't just lose his position, he was blacklisted by HR managers throughout the industry. In this city, gossip spreads faster than fire. Once your reputation is compromised, especially by an affair with a subordinate, career doors slam shut almost permanently. The financial fallout was not long in coming, crashing down like a tsunami. Marcellus lost his primary income, but the bank's collection calls kept arriving on schedule. The car payment, the mortgage, the credit cards, it all became a noose slowly tightening around his throat. Before, thanks to his hefty salary and my financial management, he lived lavishly, never checking prices. Now, the monthly interest alone was enough to make him break out in a cold sweat. My phone rang nonstop. It was Marcellus. Seeing the name husband flash on my screen, I let out a hollow laugh and promptly changed it to Marcellus Ruiz. I did not pick up. I let it go to voicemail. Then the messages began. At first, they were desperate pleas, asking for my forgiveness, begging me to retract the report to give him a second chance. Since I did not respond, the tone shifted to bitter accusations, calling me vicious and cruel for having destroyed his life. I skimmed them and deleted every one. Cruel. When he was wrapped up with another woman while I waited for him at home with dinner on the table, did he spare a thought about the word cruelty? When he squandered our shared funds on lavish presents for his lover, did he consider my hard work? I merely took what was rightfully mine. His parents, who reside down south, even phoned me. His mother, in tears, berated me, labeling me a terrible wife who had ruined her husband and their entire family. She insisted it was perfectly normal for a man to stray, and a wife's duty to tolerate it for household harmony. Upon hearing that, I felt a profoundly bitter acceptance of a woman's lot. I calmly informed my mother-in-law I couldn't live with a traitor, and ended the call. I then blocked every number from his family. I refused to listen to any more sermons on their self-serving morals. Marcellus was now destitute, having lost it all: his wife, his family, his career, his good name, and now he was sinking in debt. He would now roam that spacious, yet vacant apartment, confronting only four walls and the crushing solitude. This was the most just penalty for a man who failed to appreciate what he had. Kaani's fate was not much dissimilar. The moment Marcellus faced suspension, she was summoned by HR. She walked into the office with puffy eyes and a haggard expression, a stark contrast to the confident, seductive woman from that evening. The choice to end her internship agreement was swift. The justification? Breaching internal conduct policies and harming the professional atmosphere. Kaani wept and pleaded for another opportunity, claiming youth and succumbing to temptation. However, in the cutthroat corporate realm, such unsophisticated justifications are worthless. This was a major company. A disgraceful dismissal meant that the doors to her career had effectively slammed halfway shut. Even worse than her job loss was the scorn from her colleagues. The tale of the audacious mistress who defied the actual wife went viral on the company's anonymous message boards. While Kiani was gathering her belongings into a cardboard box, not a single person came near to speak with or assist her. All of them just stared at her with contempt, murmuring behind her back. The very men who once flirted with her now steered clear as if she were a disease, afraid of being caught in the scandal's fallout. Kiani exited the office by herself, clutching her box. The vast, deserted corridor appeared to be the thorny road that lay ahead. By the elevator, her path intersected with the very same security guard who had observed her hasty escape just days earlier. His look of compassion was the final blow that shattered her composure, and Kailani at last collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. She fled the building, escaping the taunts and jeers of others. According to what Lysandra informed me, following that ordeal, Kaani could no longer bear the scrutiny and relocated. She set all her social media accounts to private and vanished from the online sphere entirely. It turned out to be a costly lesson for a young woman only beginning to find her way in the world. She attempted to barter her looks and her youth for a frivolous prize, but in the end, she forfeited what is most precious to a woman, her dignity and self-respect. I felt no pity for Kaani. She selected that route, disregarding all morals and ethics, so the repercussions were hers to bear. My only wish is that after this harsh setback, she learns to live more righteously for the remainder of her days. 2 months later, our paths crossed. Again at the courthouse for our divorce hearing. Marcellus appeared to have aged 10 years. He wore an unkempt beard and creased attire. His eyes begged me for something, but I held a frigid and detached demeanor. Lysandra joined me as my counsel. Her sharp, professional demeanor seemed to unnerve Marcellus even further. During the hearing, Marcellus desperately claimed he still loved me and wished to mend our relationship, however. Lysandra produced the undeniable evidence of his affair, extinguishing his fragile hope in a single move. Splitting our property became the most contentious issue. Our luxury condo was the main asset. Marcellus, driven by his pride, insisted on keeping it, fearing he'd end up on the street. He offered to pay me for my portion in monthly installments. I let out a scornful laugh and shook my head decisively. I would not allow any financial link to bind me to my former husband. Lysandra, on my behalf, stated my terms. He could pay me 50% of the home's value in a single payment, plus the $40,000 my parents gave for the remodel, or we would sell the condo and divide the proceeds. He would also have to assume the remaining mortgage balance. Marcellus's face, jobless and deep in debt, became ashen. How could he possibly find hundreds of thousands of dollars so quickly? The bank had already begun mailing foreclosure warnings after he fell 3 months behind on payments. Ultimately, he was left with no option but to agree to sell the home. The condo, once his greatest pride, was listed as a bargain opportunity well below its market value to ensure a fast sale. After settling the mortgage, my portion, and my parents' $40,000, Marcellus had almost no money remaining. With a shaky hand, he signed the divorce decree. His misshapen autograph ended our 6-year marriage. He departed the courthouse with nothing, in both a literal and a figurative sense, lacking a home or a car. He had sold it to cover his debts and was now without a wife, employment. He stood isolated in the sunlit courthouse plaza, silently observing as I left in a taxi. The cost was steep, but the blame was entirely his. I collected the funds from the home sale and our asset split. The amount was substantial, sufficient for a fresh start. Rather than a large flat like before, I picked a cozier condominium in a tranquil, tree-filled area. I furnished my new place to my own liking. Vanished were the gaudy and showy furnishings meant to please Marcellus's ego. Instead, I chose soft beige hues, living plants, and a simple, solid wood bookcase. Each part of the home mirrored my own personality and conveyed an extraordinary calm. This evening, Lysandra is over for the housewarming. We're on the balcony in a cool breeze, sipping red wine and looking at the lit-up city. Lysandra raised a toast to my freedom for escaping that whole mess. I grinned and touched my glass to my dear friends. Without her resolve and fortitude, I likely would not have endured this crisis so bravely. My phone buzzed, alerting me to a notification. My paycheck had arrived. I was promoted to team leader for successfully managing a key project. The demanding work has aided me in slowly moving away from the pain of my past. I opened up Facebook and noticed a message from someone new. Her profile image showed a sunflower in its full bloom. She expressed her gratitude. I learned Lysandra had posted my story on a women's forum as a warning, altering all the names and private information. This woman explained that my story had empowered her to finally walk away from a husband who had been unfaithful and cruel for so many years. As I read her words, a peculiar warmth spread through my chest. My suffering hadn't been for nothing. It had become a source of strength and a beacon for other women lost in their own sea of sorrow. I drew in a deep breath, savoring the crispness of the autumn evening. The past was now sealed behind the courtroom doors, and before me stretched an endless sky brimming with promise. My name is Ayana. I am 32 years old. I am single, fiercely independent, and genuinely happy. I smiled, raising my glass of wine. The sharp taste of the vintage and the sweet finish that followed reminded me of my own journey. I realize now that one must endure the bitterness to truly appreciate the sweetness of liberty. I hope you enjoyed this story. From which city are you tuning in from? Let's connect down in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, consider supporting me with a super thanks. It helps me continue bringing you more tales like this one. I deeply appreciate your wonderful support and can't wait to read your thoughts on the story. You'll now see 2 new life stories on your screen that I think you'll love, and there is so much more to discover on my channel, so be sure to subscribe. I'll see you again in the next life story. With all my love and respect.